Hello, and welcome to Music Maps, the Rock and Roll Book Club podcast. In each episode, we use a place as a jumping off point for a conversation about music, anywhere from the obvious to the obscure.
Compass in hand, we stick a pin in some of music's backwaters and talk to fascinating authors and musicians along the way. I'm Mark Hart, the founder of the Rock and Roll Book Club, and I'm joined by Simon Cardwell,
Hello.
The Mercator of Music Maps. Hello, Simon.
But sometimes these conversations don't link to the format that well, so sometimes you don't have a clear place that you're going to pin in the map, which is kind of the case today. So, we're going to be covering a fair bit here.
So our Music Maps guest today is Yvonne Innes, wife of the musician and comedian Neil Innes, best known to many for the Bonzo Dog Doo-Dah Band, the Grims, the Rutles, Monty Python, and as we shall see, so much more. Yvonne has written a wonderfully tender, revealing and joyful book, Dip My Brain in Joy, A Life with Neil Innes, which is published, today as it happens, by 9-8 Books. Yvonne, welcome to Music Maps.
Thank you.
And to 21 Soho in London's glittering West End, where in a couple of hours you'll be talking about Neil and the book with Adrian Edmondson.
I will.
Is this area, Soho, one for which you have any fond memories?
Well, I don't know about fond. I think it was where I grew up with Neil. We were in Soho a lot of the time when we went to Goldsmiths College.
You lived the swinging 60s,
We did. And a lot of it was around Soho, but it was very different. Had a very different feel to the feel it's got now, which is. You
just mentioned Goldsmiths College, and this is where you first met Neil. So what can you tell us about this first meeting?
Well, it nearly didn't happen, really. I turned up late there were Bonzos were backing Yes for the big band, and I turned up late to hear them, and so I missed the Bonzos. But as I came in, somebody grabbed me and pulled me towards one of the Bonzos, and it was Neil. Everyone was dancing, and so we danced. But, I was looking over his shoulder at another student. He was looking over mine at another student. So that first meeting didn't really go anywhere. But very quickly after that, we started noticing each other, and then he would jump down and stop playing the piano very quickly when I went past and things like that. So he was just very funny and very jokey, and that's how we got together, really.
And what made you go to that gig? Was it simply a gig in the college?
Yeah, well, Goldsmiths was notorious for fantastic gigs, fantastic dances, and I think it might have been called the Red Dance, this one. And I was into music, but we were into blues much more. And in Goldsmiths, you had all these blues bands that would travel.
Who else had you seen at Goldsmiths?
Well, we saw all these blues artists like Howling Wolf, and although, they would come through and we'd be late at night out
Muddy
there
Waters,
dancing.
people like that.
Huh?
Muddy Waters, did he ever come?
Yeah. It was amazing because they were such big names, but they were there. They were sort of 2 feet from us. So really, that was where I was, and jazz and things. And so I hadn't really come to watch the main band at all. I'd just come to be where it's at, man.
And what can you remember about that first experience of seeing the Bonzos? Can you separate that from the subsequent times you saw them?
When Neil asked me to come and see my band, you mean? And I went to see them in a pub. I think maybe it was Juragan Arms or something. But anyway, I was absolutely. I just assumed it was going to be a band of the sort that bass, 2 guitars, and drums, and a singer. And
it was anything but.
But not only that, they were so amazing. Every one of them was dressed completely differently. They all did what they wanted. Roger was running around most of the time trying to get his machines to work. That was just crazy. And I thought, what am I watching? But the first thing that happened was that there was this dustbin in the middle of the room. And Neil didn't warn me. And so then when this started, Rule Britannia, and then this thing suddenly exploded. And there was the shock. Everybody was in shock. And they sold a hell of a lot of drinks that night, apparently, double what they normally sell. But the thing is, once that thing went off, nobody could look anywhere else. The Bonzos were there. They had their audience.
Wow.
They were crazy.
So who was in the band at this point?
Viv Stanshaw, Roger Spear, Vernon Dudley. And then many people, I mean, I've often been asked in strangest places, like Ipswich Town Centre. I used to play with the Bonzos. Did you?
It's a slightly
well, maybe.
rotating cast of people coming in and out.
Yes, they did. And stayed for a couple of weeks and then disappeared.
Did they rehearse much? Was this unplanned or completely off the cuff?
They used to get to the gig and do a bit of rehearsing then, but it depends, what they were doing. They were up to each individual. I mean, Viv was often, drinking, and they all drank a lot. So it wasn't really, you couldn't call it rehearsal, but they did try. Neil tried really hard to get them all to play the same thing at the same time. But sometimes...
It does feel like you are herding cats, at the very least. All of the props, the dustbins that explode and things. I understand you would often accompany Neil to go and find these things. Where did you find yourself digging around for?
Deptford Market was a favourite.
Deptford Market.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still a market, but it was brilliant then. We found everything any student could possibly need. All our clothes and all the CDs vinyl.
Shellac,
Yeah,
78.
Shellacs. Yeah, we found all that there, everything.
So you'd be going out looking for things. So some of the song titles that the Bonzos have: Hunting Tigers Out in India, and The Stalkers Brought a Son and Daughter to Mr. and Mrs. Mickey Mouse. So
Exactly.
I say the titles alone create images in our minds.
Yeah.
So you're going out to try and find.
Yes, the
some of
best
the
one,
things.
the one that made everyone laugh most was the one that
Oh,
was
was
chosen.
that the thing? Was that how you marked it? Which got the biggest?
Yes, the title.
So it was mostly covers originally, but when do they start to write their own material?
Well, it sort of happened when Bob Kerr joined the Bonzos for a short while, and then he heard that this band had made a huge hit on the radio, recording a song on the radio. There wasn't a band. They just the writer had done it, got together some friends, and so there was an opportunity for the Bonzos to become this band that recorded this song.
Vaudeville band.
New vaudeville band. And Bob came running in and said, well, guess what? You can be the new vaudeville band. And the band went, just crazy. Then we're the Bonzos, So Bob went off and played with the vaudeville band. And then the vaudeville band, when you saw them on television, looked very much like the Bonzos. They had the sort of hair, they had the speech things, they had all sorts of things. And that depressed the Bonzos hugely. So they decided, well, maybe we shouldn't be singing old songs. Maybe we could write our own. And then Neil wrote Equestrian Statue, and it all took off then.
I'm obviously from the northeast of England, you might be able to tell. So whenever the northeast comes up in a book, I always make sure we get it in the chat. So I have to get in. The Bonzos are sent to play 2 shows at working men's clubs, half an hour apart, in Newcastle and South Shields, which is where my mum is from. So how did they end up getting this gig to go up to
Somebody offered them a contract, and they were so amazed to be offered a contract. So they thought big time. So they signed it, and immediately they were sent up north to do the working men's clubs, which they had no idea about. They all ended up wishing they hadn't signed it. But
and I think the venue said that they wouldn't be paid if they mentioned football.
That was the funniest thing.
That was quite funny.
And the Bonzos wanted to be paid off. They were so fed up. And so one night, without any music or anything, Roger walked straight out onto the stage and shouted, "Football!" And the management said, "That was great, lads, keep it in." And they couldn't get paid off.
So they're driving around to all these places, going up and down. The A1 was very new at that point, I think. And they're doing all these venues in London, such as the Tiger's Head in Catford, the Bird in Hand in Forest Hill, all these places that were, I guess, are mostly long gone now. But in 1967, they become the resident band on the ITV programme Do Not Adjust Your Set. Is this Neil's first interaction with what goes on to become Monty Python?
Yes, it was. I think it was Michael, Eric and Terry Jones at that point. And Terry Gilliam was doing the animated stuff. But the thing about Neil was that he was still trying to get the Bonzos to keep in time, do this and sort of banging so they would have something to follow. And I think the Pythons were so amazed at this group of performers, but also they realised that if they wanted to get through to anyone, the best person to get through to was Neil, because they couldn't cope with the rest of them. They were so out to lunch. So, yeah.
How did you find being around these very sharp-thinking, fast-witted, intellectual...
Well, for me, I was left behind, but for Neil, it was lovely. It was like a birthday. I mean, you know, he was as quick as they were. He had the memory of 2 elephants. He knew everything like that. So he found his soulmates very quickly. Yeah. And the Python's wives were lovely people as well. And, yeah, so we all got on really well.
Yeah, so you get on with the various members of Monty Python, as we've just mentioned. Neil becomes known as the 7th Python.
There's a line in your book, which is brilliant. Michael Palin, when asked, is Neil his 7th Python, he comes back with a really good line. Can you remember that?
He's the first Neil Innes.
Yes. He says, some call him the 7th Python, and he's often been referred to as the 5th Beatle. Yes. But really, he's the first Neil Innes. So... you and Neil are in and around swinging London, very much part of it seems, in the 1960s. So who were you rubbing shoulders with? Draw us a picture of swinging 60s London.
Well, we had all the fashion people like Mary Quant and Vidal Sassoon.
Yvonne's hair is very good as well, actually. They've got a touch of the Sassoons about it.
It's pretty bad today. But anyway, Vidal Sassoon. And there were those. And then there was The Who, and the Stones and the Beatles, and they were, you know...
Jimi Hendrix?
We were around well, Neil met Jimmy. I didn't meet Jimmy in the loo, didn't he?
He lived here.
Yeah, yes, that was funny. But he was equating his stage act with the Bonzos, saying it's just as mad. I thought
setting fire to things. When did Neil first meet the Beatles?
Well, he saw them when he was recording at Abbey Road with the Bonzos, and my brother makes the noises for the talkies, and they were recording one of George's songs, and he went off to the loo. Now, coming back, he just listened to the music going on there. Of course, Neil's a great musician. He just loves music, and especially this thing with the Beatles, they were very good at the chords they made were so, you know, obvious at all. Yeah. And Neil was sort of absolutely in heaven listening to this sort of, I think it was an F over an E, but, you know, that might have been an E over an F as far as I know, but it was something that made him so deliciously happy. So he skipped back to the Bonzos and went, my brother makes the noises for the talkies, and it's all rat-tat-tat. But he didn't really meet them then, but they came, we had an after-show party that we were invited to, the Beatles after-show party. And they were all there in their suits.
Very smart suits, I'm sure.
Oh, very, very smart. But that's when John said the only word he ever said to me was, hello, Blondie.
So how did the band, the Bonzos, come to appear in the Magical Mystery Tour?
Mike McCartney.
Yeah.
That's
Paul's brother.
Yeah, Paul's brother. Said to Paul, they were looking for something for their cabaret, and he suggested the Bonzos, and Paul thought it was a great idea. Paul apparently had seen the Bonzos on stage, but I don't know where or when, because we didn't spot him, but he obviously knew what they did.
So which of the Beatles did Neil get on with the best?
George. He had the same sort of ideas about life and everything as George. And I mean, George was very much into Hare Krishna and things, which Neil wasn't, but they got on really well. I think that Neil never liked the trappings of being famous. He could have done with earning a lot more money and people paying him properly. But he felt he was exactly the same as everybody else, except he could play the piano. And George felt the same way. The pizzazz, the fact he couldn't walk down the high street,
George was never into that.
No,
Yeah.
and
I think from when the Beatles stopped touring in '66, I think George played the rooftop gig, the concert for Bangladesh, one tour of the US, and I think a few gigs at the Albert Hall, and that's the only gigs he ever did after that. So he obviously didn't like that.
No, but he loved spending time in his studio. Neil loved being in the studio. That was the first thing we built when we went to France, was a studio under the house. And yeah.
Now, 1968 brings the release of I'm the Urban Spaceman, bona fide chart hit, and the band appear on Top of the Pops with this. Now, on the sleeve notes, there's a mysterious person. Who is Apollo C. Vermouth?
That's Paul.
Paul?
Paul McCartney.
And what did Paul do with this song?
He produced it. And that was very funny, actually, because Jerry Bron was the manager, and he was very sharp about time in studios. Nothing should take over 10 minutes and all that sort of thing. So the Bonzos really didn't want him to do it. And so he said, so they came into the room and they said, look, Jerry, we don't want you to produce this. We've got someone else. He said, who have you got? I can imagine, just Paul McCartney.
That's very interesting because Jerry Bron, you mentioned this in the book, is the brother of the actress Eleanor Bron.
Yes.
You had an encounter with Eleanor, didn't you? Or rather, Neil did.
Paul was there playing a ukulele, and she said, "Is that a poor man's ukulele?" And he said, "No." No, she said, "Is that a poor man's guitar?" And he said, "No, it's a rich man's ukulele." Got it right.
The Bonzos come to an end in 1970 after one of several disastrous trips to America. And Neil's next project, turns out to be the Grimms. So tell us a little bit more about the Grimms and how this collective came about. They're a supergroup, really, aren't they?
It would have been Andy Roberts playing with Neil, and just trying to think, and John
I think
Halsey.
it was a gig at Greenwich Town Hall.
That's right. But that was a scaffold gig. They asked the Bonzos to play with them.
Yeah.
And then, just as they'd done that, their door opened and Keith Moon came in with his girlfriend. So Keith sat at the drums and demolished them. They were, almost immediately. So they were sent to our house to get the kids' drum set. That was where you heard my son doing "Come On, Feel the Noise." But it was sent to get his kit, and that was completely demolished. And in fact, as soon as he hit the bass drum, it shot across the room, so it had to come back, and he had to sit his girlfriend facing the audience the whole gig while he thumped the things.
So this is Keith Moon playing a child's drum.
Yeah, didn't last
It's
very
very
long.
Bonzo Band, that, though, I
Yeah.
think.
But I think it was the scaffold. It wasn't Grimm's at that point.
No, because the Grimms come from this. And the Grimms, we call them a
Yes, that's
supergroup. And the Grimms are so called because it's the surnames
Yes,
of...
Gorman,
Yeah.
Roberts.
Andy Roberts, Neil Innes, Roger McGuff, and Mike McGeer.
Yeah.
And
there was Brian Payne.
substantial.
And Brian Payne.
Well, this is where it all goes wrong,
Yeah.
because
Goes wrong
they're
when
now joined by Adrian Henry and the other Liverpool poets. Adrian Henry and Brian Patton join them. But you say in the books a slightly different prospect to the Bonzos. Roger McGuff, you say, is more focused. He's very fast talking, quite funny. Brian is a bit more romantic. But a mad pairing.
Difficult to manage all these people involved in this project?
Well, I never thought that was a time in my life. I have to say, I was full of all sorts of, I thought our life was absolutely brilliant. We were sailing, we were having such a good time, and it didn't really, nothing could have brought me down. It was a time in my life when I had excess hormones, I think. I was sort of flying most of the time. So do I think that, no, not really. The musicians were incredibly keen to make it as good as they could. They all tried very hard. The show was incredible because it was just so lovely having a poet and then a musician backing the poet and then a comedian. It was just a fabulous show. But of course, they were all, good at what they did. And those things don't last very long. It's like supergroups, they don't. But while it was there, it was fabulous. And it wasn't difficult, no. I thought they were all lovely people, and I think they had a few spats, but we didn't like to talk about those.
The Grimms do fizzle out in the end. But the How Sweet to Be an Idiot album is released in 1973. Did the title track almost become Neil's signature song?
It did, absolutely. That's exactly what... I mean, now everything, every time anyone mentions Neil, it's the Idiot song.
Tell us how that song came about. He shares a lift with Mike McCartney.
Oh, yes. And he, I think Neil had a duck on his head at the time.
Like you do.
And must have been a Cambridge May ball or something, because they did a lot of those, and they were all dressed up to the nines. And one of them said to Neil, "Do you mind going around looking like an idiot?" And Neil said, "You tell me." And that was how the whole thing became.
Of course, more than 20 years later, you get a bit of a windfall when the Oasis song Whatever bears a striking similarity. Do you remember Neil or yourself hearing it or being told about it?
We were told about it. Neither of us were very good at listening to music the whole time. It was mainly Neil's music. So we were told about it, and we thought, oh no, it's another thing we're going to have to fight. And we're fed up with fighting. It was just awful for anything for Neil, and we had to fight. And but we didn't. We didn't. As soon as Oasis were contacted, the management said yes. So they, it was just so nice not to have to fight. And it was good for Neil.
Because one of the things, obviously, we all take away from in the book is there are far too few of these windfalls. The missed opportunities and It was just that Neil did, there were so many ways in which Neil didn't get paid, so many times. And the problem was that Neil hated anything to do with having to ask for payment or sorting out people who hadn't paid him. He just couldn't bear it, just took him away from the music and everything. So, and I was pretty hopeless at it too. So in the end, we're pretty hippie about the whole thing. And but it wasn't, it wasn't right to do that. But when things like Oasis happened, it gave us a bit more faith in humanity again.
Yeah, so he ends up with 20% of the song, and I think a writing credit too. So
I think, yes.
A co-writing credit. So Neil becomes a key part of the Monty Python first farewell tour, and also plays on their records. Who came up with the whistling part in Always Look on the Bright Side of Life?
Neil was there when Eric was playing about with this and trying to find, he said, there's something wrong, there's something that's missing. So Neil stood there and whistled the chorus, and it made the whole thing work. But then, having said that, I can't remember how John Altman also said, hang on a minute, it wasn't Neil. And then somebody else said, no, it wasn't you, it was me. And so we go on, and nobody knows. Neil was quite sure it was him, but I don't know, because it's the sort of thing that, happens, isn't it? Somebody could be whistling it in the loo, and then they remember hearing it. And
certainly Neil was, responsible for some of the songs on...
well, he worked with him quite a bit, with Eric, quite a bit. So it sounds logical, but I quite believe that
Holy
John
Grail,
was also around.
Knights of the Round Table was a Neil composition. So this is the height of the Pythons' fame, and they tour across Canada, as well as a month-long residency at Drury Lane here in London. Did Neil enjoy being on tour?
Loved it. Playing was what he was about. He was only truly happy with a guitar or piano on the stage. He wasn't, that was where he lived.
So the feature film, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, comes out, 1975. What did Neil contribute to this?
The Holy Grail. Well, a rabbit was dropped on his head.
Yes. Any fans of Monty Python? I remember when I was at school, and a number of my friends, two of which I've actually spoke to earlier today, would just talk about the Holy Grail just constantly, like at school every day, reciting things from it constantly.
Oh, it was massive. Yeah,
It was huge.
This was in the 90s. This was 20 years later.
Yeah, this is what the Pythons, anyone who's grown up over the last few generations, have been quoting these things in school. Yeah.
So he co-writes several of the songs and writes quite a bit of music for the soundtrack. Yeah. Some of it ends up getting changed and ultimately being on. But he does have a rabbit dropped on his head, which I think is the key. The key takeaway here.
So tell us, how did the Beatles pastiche, the Rutles, come about?
Oh, the Rutles. It was when they were doing Rutland Weekend Television, Eric and Neil. And
so this is a TV programme.
Yes.
In the 70s.
And Neil wrote a song, a very Beatle-like song. It was for a sketch. And Eric had been co-directing Saturday Night Live in America. So he took this with him, and he played it as part of what he did that evening. And they got such a reaction they got huge mailbags wanting more songs, more music, and more of both of them, really, the whole thing, more Beatles. And so Eric came back and said, so then suddenly there was a budget, big budget. They'd never seen things like that before. And Neil was asked if he could write 20 more songs by next Tuesday lunchtime.
That's easy to just write 20 songs that sound like the Beatles. Yeah. That sounds like something you could... That won't take any time, will it?
No.
Well, the remarkable thing is, he does.
But he manages to actually do it. I think prior to that, there was a sketch with George Harrison, which had happened a little bit earlier, which was perhaps the initial seed, and then He writes this song called I Must Be in Love, which is the first Rutles song. Saturday Night Live producer Lorne Michaels, who ends up coming up with the money for this. How does it all come together?
It came together brilliantly, because suddenly the money was when you can only do anything when you've got the money in the back.
Once someone's got the money there.
Yeah, so it all came together very quickly, and I thought the script was hilarious, actually, but there were a lot of it was just made up. It wasn't written. I mean, the scene in the shower wasn't written, and I don't know whether I said this in the book, but they were, Neil and what's her name, the actress he was with, were getting progressively wetter and wetter. So he said this incredibly funny line, which I can't repeat because about 3 lines, I suppose. And Eric was so amazed, he hooted with laughter, and the scene had to be shot again, and then again, and then again. He must have done 20 takes of that scene. It was incredible, but funny.
Now, it was Lorne Michaels, the producer, who again raises some money to produce the Rutles spoof documentary, which becomes All You Need Is Cash, which is released in 1978. Now, was it a big undertaking for Neil to write all the songs?
Huge. Yeah, we didn't see him for a while. But he liked any kind of challenge. Neil was a person who took challenges right on the nose. You know, he loved that sort of thing, and he loved songwriting, and he was good at it. And but he didn't. He couldn't listen to any Beatles at all. He just couldn't. You can imagine that you would automatically have to follow it if you listened to them. It would be too easy, and so he just locked himself away in the studio. And kids wondered if he died half the time. You know, sort of. He would come over occasionally, and the tune would be buzzing round, or he'd say something like, "Do you remember that Beatles period when this sort of song happened? What were we doing at the time? Can you remember anything about it?" And then gradually he'd get into the feel of the time that he's trying to write about and write the song. But he definitely went back to how he felt at the time.
Am I right in saying that Eric Idle isn't actually on the recordings?
Yes, no, you're right. Yeah, he isn't. He couldn't play the guitar at the time well enough, so Ollie Hulsell did all that. And it is said that it was strange that Ollie Hulsell was the 5th Beatle, the 5th Rutles. Yeah, 5th Beatle.
There's a lot of 5th Beatles. There's not as many 5th Rutles, but there we go.
But Ollie was the best guitarist ever.
How did the actual Beatles react to the Rutles?
Well, I think George thought there was a laugh. He thought he was right.
He's in the documentary, isn't he?
Yeah. He thought he'd right in with the joke. I think Paul felt less fond of it because he sort of thought, he said there wouldn't have been a Rutles if there wasn't a Beatles. And that was, what, and I thought, well, that, there wouldn't have been so much music, like it wouldn't have been Beatles maybe without the huge nod to Negro spirituals and all the sort of blues and jazz and things like that. All the music is a big muddle of music, people hearing people and being influenced by. So I didn't think that was much of a good argument. But John replied to, what did he think of the Rutles, by singing Cheese and Onions. So, so yes, I think they were fine with it. In fact, I remember George and Ringo performing Ouch in front of Neil and in front of Neil and Eric.
That must have been amazing.
Yeah, it must have been. I wasn't there. That was,
I think it's a huge compliment when you're being spoofed like this. Yeah.
Well, I actually think when, if you listen to Neil's Leonard Cohen spoof or the Dylan one, they are so good. They're as good as the original Leonard Cohen, and it's the same with the Elton John thing. I'd love Elton John to sing the Elton John spoof.
Elton has been here.
Has he?
We hosted the launch there's a guy, you may know him, Tony King, good friend of Elton. We launched his biography a couple of years ago, and he's good pals with Elton, and Elton came along to support his friend, and that was a huge joy to see him in the very tiny 21 Soho. So, I don't know, maybe he might listen to this podcast. We'll put in a word.
I think he's a lovely guy. I do. I think, and he would have done it for the fun of it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there was unfortunately, as we know, George Harrison died far too young. And again, George fans, the book is lovely. The description of the friendship that you have with George and Olivia Harrison and the times you spent. And it's a beautiful part of the book, so I'd recommend that to anybody. But there was the concert for George at the Royal Albert Hall in November of 2000, and also later a garden for George at the Chelsea Flower Show. What can you tell us about how these things came about?
Well, the garden came about because I'd worked in Friar Park for quite. We developed with Olivia, and we developed various areas of it.
So you were helping them with their garden, their house.
And I'd been doing that for years, really. But it was just one night I was walking across the garden. It was absolutely beautiful evening. And I was hearing about Chelsea. And I suddenly thought, George and Olivia loved going to Chelsea. And they've got this amazing garden. And I thought, we ought to do a memorial to George, like in a garden for Chelsea. So I did a quick sketch and took it to Olivia. And she was right behind it from the word go. She never dropped. And she's, paid a lot. You have to have a lot of money to do a big garden in Chelsea. But no, she was behind it all the time, and it was really nice. It was necessary because it was very hard work to do it.
I think Ringo came along to the flower show.
Oh, that was hilarious because I knew the Mini was coming, but I thought it would be all sort of, not, so old. I didn't expect anything really. And so it was the evening of the press evening, and there was suddenly this incredible roar. And streaming down the centre aisle was Damon Hill with Ringo in the seat next to him, in the passenger seat. And it screeched to a halt right by our garden. And so what happened was that all the press went, whoosh, they were all round our garden. And of course, the powers that be didn't really like it.
No.
They thought it was too much publicity.
There's not a lot of room in those aisles at Chelsea Flower Show to
but it was
drive
brilliant.
down there in a car. But...
I couldn't believe it when Damon Hill got out. I thought it was hilarious.
So Damon was a friend of George's because
they were into...
George was really into car racing, wasn't he? Yeah, which I always thought was very unusual. I remember hearing about that and thinking I didn't have him down as a motor racing enthusiast. And I also did not know until I read this book that George had any interest in gardening or the Chelsea Flower Show. So there we go. So
yes, he did.
What do I know?
I think you get an impression. I hadn't really given much thought to Friar Park previously, but yeah, it's a sizable plot.
It is huge, very beautiful.
It's a big garden. I actually went to the Chelsea Flower Show this year for the first time.
Oh,
My
really?
parents, for their 50th wedding anniversary, were given some tickets to go, and we went. And my mum's a very keen gardener, so I'm going to tell her to listen to this episode because it's got some gardening content on there.
Did you and she have a favourite garden on display?
I will have to ask her. My mum and dad liked it. I found it... I'm glad I've been once. I found it quite boring, to be honest.
Do you go? Do you still go, Yvonne? Do you
No,
try?
I don't.
You don't?
But it was... the thing about this garden was it was divided into 4 areas, and it was George's childhood was the first area. And then it was the Beatle time, the youth, the young Beatles, and the Beatle time. It's all full of colour. And then you went on to George's meditative time when they all went to India, so that was all very calm.
Sounds brilliant.
Then you went over a little rill to the afterlife.
And things in there. And
the waterfall was amazing because we wanted the waterfall to come down the side of this garden. But Olivia found the picture of George with an umbrella and wellies on.
Oh, yes.
And David Harbour had it imposed onto the glass, and so he was sitting under the waterfall.
So you didn't just take the front cover of Sergeant Pepper and plant marijuana plants? Okay.
What about the concert for George? Do you remember it?
Yes.
Royal Albert Hall?
Yeah.
Neil was playing, I think, with Python.
Yes, he was. And I think the funniest thing really was they did the last song was Sit on My Face. And it was the best thing ever. You felt it was so good that you felt that George had to be there because the feeling was so strong with them. The musicians were amazing. And it was lovely seeing Danny playing with them as well. And it was the most lovely experience. Incredible. So
the next Monty Python film, Life of Brian, comes out, as well as these Monty Python shows at the Hollywood Bowl in the following year. Something I really want to ask about is children's TV. So did he like doing this kind of thing?
Loved it. But it was something new. And he just wanted to do whatever was asked, really. He just loved working, and he liked working with children. I have to say our children benefited hugely because, especially with Book Tower, We got these pile of new books, brand new books.
So you're getting lots of free books.
And Raggy Dolls, well, I mean, I can't tell you the amount of people that started listening to Neil's work through hearing Raggy Dolls when they were children.
I think most children of the 80s will remember the Raggy Dolls, especially the music. I did not know he'd written it till fairly recently.
Oh, really?
And I think anyone my age will know this in a second. I've actually got a friend who I occasionally call Sad Sack, who is one of the characters. Ali in Herworth in Darlington reminds me of Sad Sack occasionally. He's just got that demeanour of that sort of slow and cumbersome kind of vibes. Yeah, the Raggy Dolls, amazing. I mean,
The Raggy Dolls passed me by.
You'll have been to it, yeah. You'll have been the wrong age.
17, 18 in the 80s. I don't know which part of this.
You weren't watching kids' telly.
No, so of course, when you then have kids, you do start to watch kids' TV again. So I've skipped a chunk there. And
you missed out on the Raggy Dolls.
I'm sure it's all up on YouTube.
It's all on YouTube.
I'm going to
You can
go and look
this up.
at Sad Sack
Look
and
up
listen
Sad
to
Sack.
Neil's music.
They were all good.
He ends up doing a lot more than just the music.
Yes, he started off doing the music, and but gradually, because he had to do the voices, he wanted to change the script. In the end, he ended up writing the thing, doing the voices. Always, I mean, basically, he did each voice one after the other as they were being filmed, and it was always one take. It's called One Take Innes. Never
So he's
had to
doing one
spend-
take, moving between all his voices.
between his voices. Incredible.
That's
But,
incredibly
yeah.
skillful, I would imagine.
He managed things like that.
Right, true or not, Mark? You decide. Did this happen or have I just made it up? Rutles drummer John Housie played on Lou Reed's Transformer.
He did.
He did?
I know that because on our playlist for this evening, I thought,
got it.
we need a little bit of. One of the problems, right? A bit of a gripe here. One of the problems with great songs from the 60s and much of Neil's output is they're about 2 minutes long.
Yeah.
They're genius, total genius. They can get so many brilliant ideas. The Night of the Round Table, I can tell you, listeners, is 1 minute 6 seconds. So I needed to pad out. our podcast, our playlist for tonight with a few songs. And early doors, if you get here around about 10 to 7, you'll hear Perfect Day, played by Rutles drummer.
Barry Wham did play on Take a Walk on the Wild Side. So 2 people have a writing credit on Monty Python's Flying Circus, who are not one of the original members of Monty Python. One is Neil Innes. The other is Douglas Adams.
Correct.
Correct. Again, who'd have thought that?
Well, I wouldn't have thought it before I read this book.
Yeah. You've actually read it, because normally Mark hasn't bothered reading it. So
I only read.
You see,
that's not true. It's
he's one of life's skimmers.
slander. No, I truly enjoyed this book. Ask me another one. Ask me the third one. Come on.
In the Rutles film, White Hart Lane substitutes for Shea Stadium.
You know what? I don't think it does, but I can't remember where my. So I don't know.
Yeah, false. Loftus Road, the home of QPR, was used. But they did use the actual fire escape from A Hard Day's Night to run down,
Yes.
which I was very impressed they found that.
Authentic detail.
And I've actually got a fourth one, so I couldn't cut it down, so I've got a fourth one. Neil and Yvonne's son Miles appears on a track by Detroit
Jay Diller.
Detroit producer and rapper Jay Diller.
This is one of the.
This is true.
Yeah, it is true, and
Let's get Yvonne to tell us what happened.
it's one of the true wonderful revelations. One of the many revelations in this book. Yeah, Yvonne, tell us about.
Well, I don't know what happened to it, but I remember Miles, who the drummer Ian, he went to America in the end. But it was Neil's first band after the Bonzos, and all the drums were set up, and they went off to the pub. And Miles, who was all of 6 years old, jumped up on the seat and started hammering away, screaming his head off, "Come on, feel the noise, boy!" You know, it was so loud. And
It's a good song to sing along when you're a kid. I
And
reckon.
Neil had recorded it, and that's why. And then it was found by, is it Jay Diller?
Jay Diller, yeah.
And and we heard about it. We didn't know.
Many years later.
It was
James from United.
James, sorry. he phoned me and told me about it, and I thought it was just hilarious.
And again, the other thing that I was unaware of was the long and loving and productive relationship with Yola Tengo.
How did Neil come into contact with Yola Tengo?
Well, Yola Tengo had to, in order to play in Britain, they had to involve some British artists, and they loved Neil's music anyway, so they involved Neil. And Neil got on, well, he got on with just about everybody, but he got on so well with them, they did little tours together. Totally different music, but they both worked at it, at making it work, and it did.
Well, anyone coming tonight, our playlist will have at least one track from Yola Tengo. It certainly has Jay
I'm
Diller's
impressed
Wire.
the level of research. This is way more.
No, it's just the book.
Way more research than you usually do, Mark.
Sadly, this book lacks an index, which made it a little
You've
harder.
actually known all the topics today.
Yvonne has helped us a great deal because the chapter titles, by and large, are Neil Innes tracks.
Yes,
There. So, but unfortunately,
It's not helpful when looking something up.
some of the latter, so we failed in some regards. But some of the latter tracks of Neil's, say, aren't available on Spotify and the Grims. And you mentioned earlier the Leonard Cohen's pastiche. I was really keen to get on, and sadly, I've been unable to find that in the short time I allowed myself.
So at the end of each episode, we each recommend something you've liked for a long time or something you've recently discovered. Mark, I see you have something written down. This is the most prepared you've ever been.
Clarkson's Farm. There you go. Linked to the plants thing. My wife was away in San Francisco last week, and so the programs that we have been watching together, Slow Horses is one. Ludwig. That's good. David Mitchell's Ludwig. And I had a sneak peek of Rivals, I must admit. But basically, I wasn't allowed to kind of get ahead of her on some of the programmes. So I was on Amazon and I just put Clarkson's Farm on. And boy, it's great. I know Jeremy Clarkson has his detractors, and I know why. But this is a fabulous programme. I think I watched, it's 3 seasons in now. I think I watched a bit of the first season when people were talking about it. And I didn't stick with it. But yeah, gosh, all human and animal life is in there. My recommendation, Clarkson's Farm on Amazon Prime.
Well, I think you should, go out and get a big rake and sweep all those leaves off. Failing that, open a bottle of bubbly.
A practical recommendation.
I like
raking leaves. I have never raked a leaf in my life.
Well, you should go out to some of your more elderly housebound neighbours and offer to rake their leaves.
I haven't got a gun.
You haven't, but maybe your neighbours do. You don't. It's just street
Rake the
trees.
paving.
Get away with it.
So, Simon, what's yours?
Mine is Al Pacino has released a book, Penguin. I'm listening to the audiobook, narrated by the man himself. Just up to The Godfather Part 2 at the moment.
Oh, wow.
The original script apparently was pretty bad, and they had to rewrite it to make it what it ended up becoming. So,
I haven't seen Al doing an event yet. I'm sure that's about to happen somewhere large.
Too many events.
I know one of our regular attendees at Rock and Roll Book Club, I'm going to give a shout out to Vicky. Vicky was last night at the South Bank where Keanu Reeves was in conversation because he has written a book with, is it Gina Melville? Anyway.
I'm also going to recommend The Young Ones is on the iPlayer, seeing as we have one of the young ones with us tonight. I've been watching. They're all on the iPlayer, so I've been going through those.
Well, I have a heretical opinion. It's not about the young ones, but it is simply that Bad News, which Adrian Eberson is part of, is better than Spinal Tap. So, all that remains is to say thank you to Yvonne. Thank you for coming along to our podcast. Dip
fun.
My Brain in Joy, A Life with Neil Innes, is available wherever you buy books. Honestly, it's a proper Rock and Roll Book Club recommendation. And thank you to everyone who is listening and following this podcast. Now, you know the drill by now. Reviews, ratings, favourable comments are hugely encouraging and helpful. So if you enjoy what we do, please share the love. Ta-ta!